At Buckingham Palace, there is no changing of the guard. On the streets, soldiers now patrol with police. Tonight, Britain is braced for another terror attack, all because of what is not known about this man, the Manchester suicide bomber, and the company that he kept. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. This is The Day.
This is the place in the northwest of England.
It is now concluded on the basis of today's investigations that a further attack may be imminent.
So this is the place now with kids of our own. Some are born here, some drawn here, but we all call it home.
You know, I think we're all still asking ourselves the questions of, well, how could we not have known?
So people will see additional police officers. They will see officers who are carrying firearms.
You know, by all intents and purposes, it was just another lad.
Because this is the place where we stand strong together with a smile on our face. Mancunians forever.
Also coming up, when a president meets a pontiff. Today, Donald Trump visited Pope Francis. Guess what Mr. Trump said as they parted ways? We'll tell you in about 14 minutes. Well, we begin the day with a family's ties to terror. The investigation into the Manchester suicide bomber is moving quickly and moving across continents. Today, the father and brother of the suspected suicide bomber, Salman Abedi, were detained in Libya. The brother was reportedly taken into police custody on suspicion of links to so-called Islamic State. A second brother was arrested during police raids in the UK. Now, it comes as more details about the Manchester suicide bomber emerge. Investigators say Salman Abedi dropped out of university 5 years ago, but not before several people reportedly made calls to the police about his hardline statements in favor of suicide operations and the conflict in Libya. Today, we learned Abedi had traveled to Libya and Syria for several weeks and had just returned to Manchester a few days ago. More on the mind of an extremist in just a moment. Our first report tonight takes us to Manchester.
A city in mourning as residents pay their respects to the dead.
I think it's the defiance of Manchester that, life very much goes on and we never forget and we pay homage to those that lost their lives, but it's one of those things where the city doesn't stop.
But it's the same with Berlin, it's the same with Paris, it's the same with Nice, it's all over the world. How do you defeat these people? You can't. All you can do is be vigilant and carry on as normal and don't let them win.
Police have identified the suspected bomber as 22-year-old Salman Abedi. He was born and raised in Manchester by Libyan parents. Investigators are now hunting for accomplices who may have helped him build the suicide bomb.
I think it's very clear that this is a network that we are investigating, and as I've said, it continues at a pace. There's extensive investigations going on and activity taking place across Greater Manchester as we speak.
This is where Abedi lived. Heavily armed police raided his house and other properties in the neighborhood. They have made a number of arrests. The city's Muslims have condemned the attack, but the community remains on the edge amid reports of hate crimes.
We are concerned about reports we are receiving about anti-Muslim acts. These are terrible anti-Muslim acts, ranging from verbal abuse to acts of criminal damage to mosques in the area and outside the area.
In London, soldiers have been stationed at key locations. Britain has raised its terror threat level to critical, meaning another attack could be imminent.
All right, to provide some background on this developing story, we're joined now via Skype by terrorism and security analyst David Lowe in Liverpool. David, it's good to have you on the show. The New York Times has posted pictures on its website, which it says shows remains of the backpack that the bomb was in. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, I've had a look at it, and it certainly looks what has been thought quite a sophisticated device, and one that you do need some expert knowledge in how to put this together. I mean, I am no technical expert, and you know, this isn't my area of true expertise. But you look at that, and you look at that, and put it with all the other information, you can see now that al-Badi was not acting alone. He has been working with other people, and this is, I think, why the UK is critical, because there's the fear that the individual who may have put this device together is still at large, could put a similar device together and either themselves use it or get someone else to use it. And we can see the devastating effects of it on Monday evening. So I'm quite surprised that this is being released, but I'm sure there'll be an explanation of how the New York Times got hold of it.
Well, we've had a lot of developments in this story today. I mean, it's a fast-moving story so far. The main suspect's brother and father, they've been detained. Is that unusual that we're looking at possibly an entire family that could be behind a terrorist attack?
Well, I suppose if you look at other terrorist conflicts and other areas, it is unusual. It isn't unusual for a family. I think where we've got used to in Europe, certainly over the last few years, with groups like Islamic State, we've seen individuals from families going to a region. But you look at what's happening. Yes, it is. You know, it's unusual, and obviously there's been support from some authorities in Libya. And don't forget, Libya has its own political problems. It's been having a civil war since the fall of Gaddafi. And it shows you that this is an international threat. It is of an international nature.
And we are also hearing reports that, you know, possibly so-called Islamic State could be behind this. There have been reports today that the suicide bomber had just returned from Libya, that he had also been to Syria. Is this tragedy from Monday night, is it part of the nexus that we're seeing of global terror going from Syria, Libya, and then, you know, making its mark in Britain?
Well, I mean, there's a number of strands there. Yes, I mean, it does show that relationship of the international terror. Obviously, you look at like Islamic State, it's been losing territory. So those foreign fighters, those who have come from European states, North American, Australia, and so on, they're looking to return home. And of course, not all those returning home, you know, may want to carry out terrorist attacks. But here's the fear: those who are well trained could pose a great threat. And obviously, if you're travelling to Libya and to Syria in recent times, it has to be questioned. No doubt, this is why people get on information systems, intelligence systems. You've got to question why you go into these regions when the conflict is so high in those particular countries. So we are looking at this threat, and I think normally we've seen attacks by lone actors, and then eventually the groups like Islamic State will claim responsibility. But it may be a little bit not so much a direct order or direct control from the likes of Raqqa, but you can clearly see there's some people who are really embedded within the narrative, this extreme Islamist narrative that groups like Islamic State profess.
David Lowe in Liverpool. David, thank you very much. We appreciate your insights tonight.
You're welcome.
A young man raised in Manchester, and now it appears he was radicalized to hate the people, the place that he grew up in. How to combat the radicalization? Joining me tonight from Washington, D.C. is Mohammed Fraser Rahim. He's Executive Director of North America for Quilliam International. That's a counter-extremist organization with headquarters in the UK. Mr. Fraser Rahim, it's good to see you. We appreciate you taking the time to be on the day this evening. Let me ask you to kind of pick up on what we've been hearing in our reports so far in this show. Is what we've seen in Manchester, is this simply just a repeat of other terrible, heinous crimes that we have seen connected to radicalization?
Yeah, thank you for having me. With these events that we see right now, and particularly in Manchester, unfortunately are criminal acts carried out by either the Islamic State or some offshoot. And again, this is too early to tell exactly definitively. Certainly we've seen the credit that they've claimed as part of their modus operandi, and we've seen this repeatedly in the past. What this is a concern for all of us, those who are in the free world, those who are in liberal democracy, is that we have an individual who was radicalized potentially in British society, where we all want to protect Muslims, Christians, Jews, and we have to find measures to make communities more resilient. We must work holistically speaking, not just within Muslim communities, with state security services, with civil society organizations to stop this threat. We cannot see this as the new normal. Unfortunately, these events that have taken place are a concern for all of us.
I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm completely with you on this. But, you know, we've got reports coming out today that say people who knew the suicide bomber 5 years ago, before he quit university, they had phoned the police. We've got at least two separate incidents where people phoned the police to basically report that this young man was talking about being inspired and wanting to carry out suicide missions and it being in support of the conflict in Libya. I mean, people tried to inform the police, and yet this man was still able to do what he did. So are we not trying to, what are we advocating here? A place where we have absolute security?
You know, what it also shows is mechanisms are not in place at the grassroots levels, and then communications with law enforcement, and then also within state security services, particularly within the UK. Unfortunately, in many respects, you could see this as being a failure, a breakdown of communications. And anytime an individual is able to pass information along, and communities particularly wanting to do something proactively, this is a concern. If this was a fact, again, this is early reporting, but if this was actually a fact, then we've had a problem right there and a total breakdown of passing information along in a manner which we can protect our society, and events that took place, unfortunately, earlier this week should have never taken place.
And what do you make of what we're hearing about the brother and the father being detained in Libya today? The brother is suspected of being part of a plot to maybe do something in Tripoli similar to what we saw in Manchester. I mean, it looks like you have a family here that is involved in terror. I mean, that is something that we're not used to. How would you combat that?
Well, we do have some past precedents that we can look at. Example, the Cauchy brothers, obviously, that were in France, who were working in conjunction to carry out attacks in obviously in Paris, and they worked side by side with Ahmed Koulibaly, who's of the Malian descent as well, French citizen. And so there are some indication that, again, groups are adjusting, they're adapting, they're becoming as innovative as possible. They're learning too as well, which is quite unfortunate. If in fact we know that it's proven that these individuals, the father and the son, are involved in these incidents, then what we have is perhaps a game changer. It's something to continue to monitor, and this is of concern too as well. And so what you have is this communication, perhaps unfortunately, between family members who were involved in this incident. And the jury will be out. I mean, in terms of post-mortem, we will get more details and put information together in a much more synergized fashion in the next days to come as well.
What would be your advice tonight to the people in Manchester who are reeling from this? What should be done now to counteract any of the hatred that may have been spawned by this?
You know, unfortunately, we see that the vast majority of individuals who have seen the brutality of terrorist actions have been fellow Muslims themselves. individuals who do not subscribe to this draconian, strict interpretation of a faith practiced by over 1.5 billion Muslims. The events that took place require Muslim community members, imams, the religious leadership to stand up and speak more firmly against this. This event right here that took place should be emboldened, should be a moment in which the Muslim community is more emboldened, because if there is not change, particularly within how communities are dealing with this matter, then you will see an increase of anti-Muslim hatred in Europe, perhaps in America and throughout the world. And this can be addressed when the global community, particularly those who are in the UK and Manchester specifically, are realizing that this cannot take place, this will not take place in the civilized world, and that these events that killed innocent young girls and boys, nieces and nephews, should have never taken place at all. This right here, it hurts my heart to hear about. Right. And as someone who's worked on these issues, working as a former government counterterrorism analyst and working this outside now, this is something that I've dedicated and we work on closely, particularly in Quilliam as well.
All right, Mr. Fraser Rahim, we're going to have to wrap it up there. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and we, applaud the efforts of all of you at Quilliam International. Mohammed Fraser Rahim, tonight joining us from Washington. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, still ahead on the day, Taiwan is set to become the first Asian country to legalize same-sex marriage. In Indonesia's Aceh province, being gay can mean public punishment ordered by a Sharia court, a continent's love-hate relationship with homosexuality. That story in just a few minutes.